Do you trust yourself? Powerful question. Have you ever found yourself wanting to start maybe a business or work towards some dream, but you feel a sense of overwhelm, confusion, find yourself procrastinating? Or maybe in relationships, you notice that you don't feel safe. It always feels like there's drama there, or like you keep having the same issues show up over and over again with new people. Why does that happen? Well, underneath all that is an issue with self-trust. And in today's episode, I bring on my longtime friend, Dr. Doktor, who's been a coach for the past 30 years and has helped thousands of people to develop incredible trust in themselves so they can feel free to live lives that are intentional, where they can step into relationships without fear, that they can step into the dreams and take the action on the things that they want to do in their life without all this emotional confusion that goes on. We break down what self-trust really is, how to identify when you're not in trust with the self, how to rebuild that self-trust, including some free tools that you can use today to help you with that, as well as how do you go about seeking connections and the help you need, whether it be through coaches, therapists, or groups, so that you can have support in developing that trust. Because the truth is, when you have trust in yourself, your life is so much better. You feel freedom. You feel the ability to move forward on the things that you want to create. All that today and more in today's episode. I'm your host, Eric Copeland, and welcome to another episode of The Music of Life. I'll see you inside. Welcome back to another episode, Dr. Ray.
Thanks for having me again. It's awesome.
Of course. We were discussing off camera about self-trust, and in particular, some of the misconceptions about it, which we'll get into. But I've just noticed that within myself, I've noticed it in people, friends, even people I've coached. And it's this, you realize that at the core of a lot of our so-called problems is the ability to have like discernment in whether we really trust ourselves in making decisions. Like, do I trust myself in a relationship? Do I trust myself, creating a business? Do I trust myself in that creative pursuit or creating something? And we may not consciously literally be saying, do I trust myself? But it's almost a feeling of fear or lack of safety, and maybe in a relationship, whatever, how it shows up. So I kind of wanted to dig into that, because I know this is an area of particular expertise for you. You've been coaching for 30 years. You've dealt with thousands of clients. And also, I wanted to bring the conversation towards the end of the podcast, by the time we get there, to talk about how someone can build that self-trust and what's the right way to go about getting help with it, through maybe methods that are, for yourself, as well as how do you go about choosing someone like a coach, whatever? How do you know that they're a good fit for you, and building the self-trust? Cool.
Okay. Yeah.
So first, what I'll do is I'll ask you a question, just a real basic question. Like, from your point of view, how would you define self-trust? Like, what is that?
Well, if a person's conscious and they're choosing this now moment with complete awareness, the opposite of a reaction or some type of mental programming, they're going to be able to say yes or no effortlessly. And that could be just simply as if you're hungry and you need food. It's not like you have to think about it like, wait a minute, is that really my stomach or not? It's just a knowingness. So when we have like ultimate self-trust, which is come from our hearts and our awareness, it takes no effort. Whereas a lot of other types of what we might call self-trust will be that I'm going to say yes because unconsciously I'm afraid to say no, or it's yes because it's how your parents did it. It's a yes because it's cultural conditioning. In other words, a person might go inwards and say, okay, I'm going to do this, or I should do this, or I better do this. But that doesn't mean that's truly them talking to their, say, capital S self. If anything, you might say it's their ego. It's their frightened part of their personality. Another way to kind of also understand this is that we have a part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala, basically its function is to assess people, places, things, basically our environment as being safe or not. So basically, it's letting us know whether or not it's threatening or non-threatening. So that means people, places, things. If we're entering a new social situation, it might go off as danger, but that doesn't mean it is dangerous. It's that it's unfamiliar. So when you become conscious, you can play with it a little bit more and recognize, oh, that's that part of myself that's still afraid, or that part of myself that's unhealed. And the closer you get to the space of where you're able to really be present with each situation with awareness, then more than likely when you ask yourself, or if it's just a kind of unconscious response, you're truly connected to your true self. And that is your consciousness of who you are right now, not under any stress, choosing what's best for you right now.
Gotcha. So I think what comes up for me when you define it that way, there's this idea that within yourself, there's this capacity to know, or there's some type of guidance system that we have, let's just say, installed in us or wired into us naturally, where if we lean into that and we trust that that's going to be where we're going to find, say, more fulfillment or movement in our life or those kind of things. So I guess I want to maybe unpack that a little bit. Like, what is the experience like when, like, how does a person know? Because I think here's what I'm trying to get at. I think I've heard people say things like this. So this would be maybe more, let's bring it like in practical terms. I've heard people say, the heart can mislead you. Don't trust sometimes you can't trust your heart, or people think that they made a decision from a place of self-trust. And then when it didn't, quote, work out, then they think that's reason not to trust themselves, or it kind of creates an internal conflict. You messed up, the relationship didn't work out, you had a failure in business or what might. Can you unpack that a little bit? Like, how do you tease that out? Like, how do you know?
Well, first off, a good way to demonstrate this would be kind of understanding the lower brain, like the limbic system, that's kind of more kind of in reaction. And it typically is feeling resistance and fear. It's afraid of things that it maybe shouldn't be afraid of, versus the prefrontal cortex, the more evolved brain, is assessing your environment. And even if, let's say, that something doesn't seem safe, you don't go into fight or flight. You kind of go, this is not the best choice. So a lot of times people will think they'll say, I should have trusted my gut instinct. But their gut instinct is actually connected to their limbic system. It's not like, I guess you say, it lacks awareness. So let's imagine that it's a woman and she has never established healthy boundaries for herself or people that she goes out and dates with. Her parents lacked boundaries. So her way of interacting in relationships is by what she's come to know. That's it. So she has done no introspection, no self-analysis. So therefore, when she meets a guy, even though this man has red flags that something doesn't feel right maybe in her body, because he looks the same as her father, because he has maybe some of the same language, her gut instinct might say, well, this is familiar. Let's choose this. And it ends up being the same type of pattern, relationship, abuse that she is familiar with. Whereas if she were to do some healing work and meet a man, and let's say he has some of the same characteristic traits that could be narcissistic or abusive, rather being afraid and feeling like she needs to make an urgent choice, she's going to go, something doesn't feel right. He's nice. I'm hearing what he's saying, but his actions or how his life has been for the last 10 years, there seems to be a misalignment. So when he says, would you like to meet for a second date? She'll say, I'll get back to you, because she needs to check with herself. And it might take practice, but in time, when she develops that more, it's just a no-brainer. And then meaning that there's no brain involved, or it's just, nope. It's just consciousness to, if she starts vibrating healthy boundaries and a strong sense of self, she'll attract healthier partners because she has learned the lesson.
Gotcha. So I'm also hearing in that it's important that, I mean, as a human, I think it's inevitable that you're going to have miscalculations, or you're gonna override that higher self or that better self, and because something's familiar, you're gonna make that choice. Those things are likely to happen. That's part of being human. So
also the pleasure. Remember that, Eric. You know this too. It could just be that you just want some joy because you lack a lot of joy. So you're not really choosing consciously. You're choosing with your pain body. You're lonely. And so you just override the red flags. That as well.
Okay. So some clues that we might be acting from a lack of trust, of that self-trust, that knowing, might be if we notice that we are maybe having, I think I'm trying to spot being emotionally reactive instead of thinking things through. So that can lead to the ignoring of red flags, like you're talking about. It's funny how relationships are like one of the best ways to spot this stuff. Neediness, where you maybe feel like overly attached or needy, or anything that person does gives you huge emotional swings of fear, stuff like that. Any other
Eric,
telltale signs?
You coached me yesterday, and it was about my son. And we don't need to get into details, but I said, I need your opinion. And you helped me out. It was amazing. And I was in reaction. And I'm a conscious person, and therefore I knew I wasn't. So I reached out to you for help. I know I'm kind of calling you in to remember this, but what was different about me that you can tell that I was reactive? Because what was it about it? You know what I mean?
The funniest thing was you were like, it was the funny thing. The biggest clue was what'd you say? You were like, you were kind of in some anger about something. I mean, you were not losing control. You're still very grounded, very much you, but I could see the conflict. Basically, option A, I do this, or option B, I do that. Or is it A, or is it B, or is it A, or is it B? And you said this things I don't know if I'm being reactive or not. And then I called that out. I was like, if you truly were in your excitement or not being reactive, you wouldn't have to question whether you're in reactivity or not. You would actually feel calm and clear about it. So I encourage you to maybe,
I was in confusion. So that's a clear indication that I was not in my body or in my heart. I was reactive. It was about my son, and you helped me out. But there you go. Confusion, having a hard time making a decision, which you mentioned. How about take a couple days away from this, Ray?
Yeah. What's the urgency? You have to decide right now. Yeah.
So you right there, whether a person knows if this is the right choice or not, by default, if you take maybe 24 hours, something will completely shift.
Yeah.
And so if there's urgency involved with the decision, unless it's like your buddy's like, hey, I'm at the end of this cliff, I'm about to fall, throw me some rope. Nothing's that urgent. And so for the most part, we can step back. So if you're not sure, you could just take pause.
Yeah. Well, this would be good because I want to sort of sidestep the conversation into a concept that we could do a whole different episode on, and I think we should. But it's the concept of what people might call bypassing, or even spiritual bypassing.
Okay.
Where, because the truth is, that situation we're in, it did evoke emotions. And I think sometimes there could be a temptation to think, I shouldn't feel this way. Like if you identify as maybe being the coach or whatever, you might identify as like, maybe men deal with this. Their way of bypassing might be, I need to snuff my emotions, and those aren't important. Those are dangerous, or fear the emotions, and maybe not that a woman couldn't do that too. But the idea is like there's something to be learned from why that situation was triggering to you. That, and if you get the lesson, you actually will gain the self-trust. You get more self-trust out of it. That's what I'm trying to say. So why do you think, like, first of all, what is like your perspective on like what bypassing, how do you see bypassing show up, like with your clients and like in your own life?
Well, I can share from that experience. So it was about my son and what's going down with the new world and education. There are a lot of things I'm not aligned with. And so my son is getting singled out and so forth. And I'm not one to put my child on a pedestal. If he makes mistakes, he needs to take accountability. But what happened in the situation was that I was in reaction. And because I was in reaction, I was seeing my son as, say, a victim, like he could be hurt. And I started creating a narrative. And that, of course, that energy moved into Papa Bear, who is trying to protect, when my son, was actually fine. It was a conversation via email with the principal. But I was creating this experience. Now, when you ask, how do you take personal accountability? And, what might that look like? It would be like if you were to direct those questions towards me, like you were the coach, you were Dr. Ray, it would be, what are you ultimately afraid of, Ray? And like, please use I statements. It could be these things. I'm doubting my parenting. Maybe I did fail to, I'm uncertain. I have control issues still. I'm not sure the direction that my son will go, or, there's a lot of uncertainty. So it'd be easy for me and other parents to go into the mode of attacking and projecting and trying to control others to change how they are to make us feel better. But whether or not those things change or not, or they take any accountability, unless I feel the lesson, such as my son's not a victim, he's here on his own free will to also, in our home, in the people who really count, things are going really well. And that in life, there's always challenges. And this is just one to help us grow. If I don't get that higher learning and awareness, that will still be there until the next trigger, a next email I get from, say, a teacher, if that were to happen. So healing things from the inside out is going to typically I statements and how this personally might be impacting you negatively, such as I feel out of control, I'm losing trust, I'm not feeling confident, things like that. And those, if you go a little deeper, those are connected to survival. They're connected to like whether or not I'll be accepted, whether I'll belong, whether I'll be persecuted. Very primal, hidden beliefs.
What's crazy about emotions is, I've learned this, is like you can't negotiate with an emotion. Like like an emotion is like it's weather. It's like a wave in the ocean. It's like arguing with an emotion is like going up to the beach and telling that wave stop. And trying to push against it. You're just going to get smothered by it. The resistance you give it will just like give it more power. It's there's no negotiating with emotion. So you have to acknowledge them, right? They have to be acknowledged. So that's like, boom, which is funny in relationships, how often like the arguments are around competing whose emotions matter most in the moment, right? The question, I think what I've realized with your coaching and the concept of accountability is what you're really saying is that yes, your emotions matter, but here's the strategy for confronting and resolving your emotions or dealing with them in a way that doesn't diminish them, but also where you don't project onto other people and create more drama in your life that is only going to make that wave bigger and bigger and bigger, and where you get kind of attached to these stories and these narratives, and you can create a whole life that's like, an emotional reaction of, say, like anger, and you do something, you could create a lot of drama and consequences in your life that make it even that much more difficult to then confront and deal with that emotion. Because at the end of the day, you have to own the fact that you played your role in your reactivity to it. So I think what you're teaching is this concept of mastery, like it's the self-mastery component. It's the discipline to realize, love yourself enough to know that your emotions are messengers, that they should be acknowledged, but that it's primarily your responsibility to do that.
Absolutely. Can I share like an example of how I have educated my son about his emotions? And I can just imagine like parents who are uncomfortable with this because of how they feel versus whether or not it's a positive result, which is driven by their emotions or not. I've seen it work with my son. I've seen it work with other kids. And that is this. So when my son, when he was younger and would fall down, he would, at first he cried, okay, for a moment, and I gave him the opportunity to cry. I never said to push that away, but very early on, I said, "Are you crying because it physically hurts?" And of course, he doesn't know this type of language, but again, you can still address your child this way because they're feeling the energy. They're looking at you, and there's communication happening regardless if they're nonverbal. So it's one, is it physically hurt you? Number two, is it an emotional hurt? Number three, is it just a change of your environment? So in other words, like if a little infant can cry by just the door opening and closing, and there's really nothing threatening, but because it heard a noise and it seems like the environment changed, that could elicit some type of fear. So early on, I helped my son assess kind of those experiences. Now, oh my God, he's like a Jedi with this. If he rarely cries when he hurts himself, what he actually does is he'll breathe it out. Like, if anything, he'll say, he'll like, shit. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, he'll blow it out and he's done. Then he moves forward to play or whatever, continue what he was doing. So I'd given him permission to feel his emotions, but do something anyway later on, such as a call of action to learn from it and to move forward rather than be stuck in it. He's a master at it. In fact, whenever there's a challenge, even if I blow up for a moment, whatever it is, like within 1 minute to 2 minutes, it'll be like, hey, let's play catch. I'm like, yeah, okay. Like we're that quick, because he knows dad doesn't sit with like these emotions either. For me, it's like emotions are the check engine light of your car. And maybe it's something that's major, or maybe it's just, hey, you need to change your oil, but it signals something for you to pay attention to and for you to address it. If you don't, such as if you don't change the oil, you can blow up your engine. You can have a heart attack. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like I see emotions and they're not always accurate, but we should pay attention to them and then see if we can grow from them to see where they're coming from. And not just that, is keep in mind that emotions don't just randomly exist and for everyone in the same way, and they're not a real thing. And what I mean by that is most people will say, when it comes to death and dying, that is so difficult. Oh my God, when my dad died, it took 10 years to get over, or I never got over my mother's death. My life became, horrible when my grandfather died. And, of course, if this is a client I was working with, it was that grandfather died and mother became depressed and neglected taking care of her son, who's now my client. It's not the death that caused that. It is what happened to the mother and a lack of integration and transparency of what happened. Okay. Whereas with when my mom and dad died and I was close to them, sure, I cried, but because my family, we looked at death as a part of living, that we moved through it a lot quicker and easier than probably most families. So here is a situation that's usually difficult for most people, death. I really loved my parents. But because early on as a child, including when we would eat dinner, my dad talked about like where he'd want to be buried, to the certain arrangements he wanted. As more matter of fact, we didn't block it off. It wasn't stuck in the shadows. So if we don't deal with our relationship to death and it's stuck in the shadows, when it does happen, it will come up. All our uncertainties will come up about our own mortality. It's not what happened to just our dad, it's what's happening to us. And so it's important to remember that, my perceptions about death is what's creating these emotions, not death itself.
What's coming up for me is the concept that the way out is through, not around. And I think that's where the bypassing component comes in. And I think the irony I noticed, like and we'll talk about maybe some victimization kind of things and even to the level of trauma. But I kind of see it as this, that whenever something happens to us or someone feels violated, okay, like a victimization, there's the story of what happened that is undeniable, and the emotions that arise when one feels violated, and the only way to truly heal from that experience is to not keep it's like people think they need to process the story over and over and over and over. And not that there's some magical time limit you have to do this, but when it comes to the actual healing, what it actually requires is stepping back into that I language and coming face to face with the actual deepest fears and beliefs that are driving those emotions that actually transcend that story of what happened. The meaning you've given to that story that you may not be conscious of, and what that means about life or whatever. And there's something magical that can happen whenever the mind is able to then perceive and see the story that you've generated or created around it. And because in the seeing of it, it seems like you also see that there's another option, which is one where there's maybe lessons packed in it, where there's something that you can come away from it. It's like what the mind needs is just to understand and have a sense of opportunity to grow, and it will always choose the path of growth if it can see it. And it seems like when we're in a victim state, we're stuck with, we can't understand, why did this happen to me? Like, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? So can you speak to that a little bit? Because you've worked with a lot of people that have had like deep trauma, and what are some of the takeaways?
I got some stuff that's coming up, but it's not necessarily deeper trauma. So my girlfriend is a coach, and all of this, by the way, is in my book about breaking down beliefs, because sometimes we will even create beliefs about how it's never going to be healed, or it's going to take a really long time, or I don't know if I'll be able to do that. So whenever I'm talking to a client and they want to improve their life, but they're saying, I don't know if I can do that, I'll say to them, well, I believe you. I believe you can do it. And until you believe you can do it, you're probably right. It's not going to happen. And so with my girlfriend, when we first started dating, she had this whole process of like where she said, this is going to take me a while to process. And I said, well, why do you believe that? And she's like, what? I said, well, it seems like I'm not dismissing you're feeling something, and I'm not denying you have a healing protocol, but your healing protocol is like a permission slip also to go through something and to heal something. And it used to be like, it would take a little while. Now, oh my God. And no, I didn't turn into this like robot or masculine person, like, oh, I'm cut off from emotions. We rarely have to sit there and take a long time, because we're also very connected or closer to joy. So it could be like, almost like with you and I, Eric, if something happens, we can just say my bad, or we'll even say something even worse that's inappropriate to each other. So you start to laugh. It's like the wrong timing purposely, because we kind of have that lighter relationship. So it's easier to, I guess, repair. I now have that with my girlfriend for the most part. So we can kind of like laugh, it could be like, for example, all suddenly I start to, there's been moments where I was raising my voice and it's early morning. But I'm not like yelling like at her. I'm like, I've had 2 cups of coffee. I've been up since 3 a.m. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And then, before she like, when going to, is he mad at me? Did I just do something wrong? She might now go, wow, goes, are you having a good morning? And I said, so you've been up for a while? And I said, wow, I sound kind of intense, don't I? She's like, yeah. I'll take a deep breath in. And then we just start laughing. We start talking. So, with beliefs, they are literally a fabrication of our consciousness. And simply put, if we can imagine the worst and we can imagine how it could have been better, and if we can hang out in the past and we can make ourselves feel shitty, then we can also imagine the best versions of ourselves. We can imagine how we would prefer to be, and we can choose how to be that emotionally anyway, regardless of what had happened. And this is not doing spiritual bypassing. This is not shoving stuff under the rug. What I'm saying here is that when we reframe negative experiences, there's an opportunity, in a way, to imagine, to see it differently, so we feel better about it and we grow from it. It's bottom line. It's just how it works.
Yeah, it's crazy how it's beautifully elegant and simple. What is it about the ego that just doesn't believe it's going to survive the emotion? or there's a sense of like, there's like it's almost like it's a feeling of like death in a way, right? Where there's and they call it like ego death. This concept, whenever you are facing, or it's never convenient, right? Like we all want to have like the perfectly manifested life where I wrote down what I wanted, and then someone called at the right time, and then all of a sudden there was $1 million in my bank account, and I got a tickle in my elbow and went and bought a lottery ticket, whatever, that kind of thing. Like everyone loves that kind of stuff. And not that those things can't happen, but I remind myself is like, Eric, you're only 5% conscious of what you actually think you want, can envision, like, because I think it's like 5% of our minds are conscious, and the other 95% is like the iceberg underneath, the subconscious, the unknown. And our emotions well up from the deep, they can come from beliefs that are like way down deep, and these waves of like emotions come up around certain situations. And if we don't give up our current identity a little bit and humble ourselves and be willing to take a look at what's really going on underneath the surface with that I language, like you're talking about, and you have techniques for that, in your book that's coming out and in your coaching, then it's only then that we really can experience growth, where we feel, what might be referred to as spiritual alchemy or healing, whatever you want to call it. It's realizing how transient and temporary your emotions are if you give them a voice, if you actually get down to the beliefs that are driving them, that you can really rapidly transform your life. And then it's almost like you have now new energy, a liberation of energy and space, where you could then, attract that relationship you want or whatever. But that we can't deny. We have to be honest with ourselves whenever how we're showing up in the world in certain areas is not functioning. It's not actually creating the result that we want it to. And
you asked me, you said Like, why is it? So there's many reasons. Okay. So a lot of it is unconscious programming. As an example, a lot of people were paying attention to Taylor Swift and Travis as an example, but most people were not asking themselves, why am I paying attention to people who I don't even really know? What does that represent in me? Is my marriage okay? Am I jealous of what they've been able to achieve? I mean, those are questions that no one asked. But everyone collectively were basically, not everyone, but many people judging. Okay. And while they're doing that, if they're parents, their kids are watching. So you're teaching kids how to model, unhealthy communication and gossiping and not taking personal responsibility. So all of us have modeled things we've witnessed. And you rarely will see TV and film where a person takes a healthy path. And again, this is how I parent my son. Almost every movie we see or comedies, it's where there's a breakup and they go to the bar. And I said, you notice, Max, that almost in every movie, they go into disempowerment. They feel bad and they think drinking is going to make them feel better. I said, you notice that? I said, so that's like a program of what they do. I said, that's not what I do. And our chiropractor, Dr. Mark Force, oh, I love him. His wife of 39 years died of bone cancer. And it was in October. Oh, God, it's so, and he had a picture on top of, there was a mantle, like when you walk into office, in a picture of him and his wife. And it said, please forgive me if I'm not shown up as my best. I'm going through a grieving process. Thank you for being a part of this. So if he was basically, because you can see his eyes are red. There was moments with me, I'm close to him. He broke down and cried. But it was going to be his first Thanksgiving without his wife last year. He went rock climbing instead. I showed Max a picture of him. He's a badass. He's like 67. He's rock climbing on ice with these picks, and he did that to push himself, and he took his daughters, and it was amazing. So I said, you notice this is, for, at least to me, a healthy path, and here's a bad path.
Yeah.
And I said,
you mean he didn't? You mean he didn't do the manly thing and be like, just suck it up and take it and keep the battle?
Yeah.
He actually felt his emotions.
He felt his emotions. He let it out. He was transparent with it because he couldn't hold it in all the time. I'll tell you the reason why I moved is because he trusts me. I mean, he knows what I do also, and he had his hands on me. And I asked him maybe the right questions, like, has she come talk to you? Have you she visit like your spiritual self, and he smiled and he said, yeah, we have that connection. And then he just talked about like how he was the first love of his life. And while he was adjusting me, and some people might think, wow, that was intense. He just looked up. He started crying. He said, and when I leave, honey, I will find you. I will find you. And even I teared up. I saw that healing process as a gift for me as well. But here, this person wasn't denying it. He wasn't playing into victimization. He was owning it. But he also was moving forward because he said this. He said, I love my work. I can't stop doing this. This is my purpose also. And my wife would want me to keep living. So he didn't just like, screw it. I'm just going to work hard and find distractions. And he's still moving through it. He's still, it's hasn't been even, it's been like 6-7 months.
Well, that's amazing. To a little bit of a pivot here too, because I'm thinking, because he's a chiropractor, and I'm just thinking about health and the body, and it's something I've always been fascinated with, how the relationship between the mind and the body. which, because everything's one, right? If we're going to get a little esoteric here, I definitely do that on my podcast. The metaphysical side of things is really kind of like answers a question of kind of like why all this works. It kind of seeks to answer that question. The idea of oneness and all that. And I see it as like, consciousness is an interesting thing because it's trying to process reality and experience it. And it has to accept everything as anything that happens obviously was possible. It must be accepted and understood. And it's the resistance to that. It's interesting, like this word resistance. When you resist what is or what happened, and in other words, bypass, not look at, avoid, that resistance, just like in electricity, if you, if anyone, like I have an electric stove, the reason that stove gets red and heats up is because electricity is flowing through a coil that's designed to resist the electricity. And it's difficult for the electricity to get through it. And that difficulty in getting through it causes it to heat up, right? And I kind of think of emotions that way, where if you're highly conductive and non-resistant, they can flow through you much faster, almost, and not create much heat or much impact. And you'll be tested. There'll be big things like your friend whose wife passed. But it sounds like what he's doing is he's open up and he's letting those emotions flow through him. And by doing so, he's not only finding more like peace within himself, but imagine how much better even just for his health that is. You see like this concept of disease or dis-ease showing up in people's bodies, and we think it's all genetics and stuff like that. It's funny how these theories are also materialistic, but that's kind of downstream from this energy that's coming through, that's trying to, like, these emotions are reacting or feeling, part of the experience. So what, in your opinion, is like the relationship between unresolved or hidden beliefs, the emotions that we get stuck in, the stories that we create, and how that impacts our physical health as well?
Well, what's interesting about what you brought up, I'll be like really transparent about. I actually got some thoughts here now. So this is how I digest life. I don't see things as coincidental. I see it as conspiring with me so I can grow. Now, when you brought up the heat thing, I never really thought about it. So I have been experiencing mild headaches, and I saw an acupuncturist before doing this share with you, and I was kind of drawing a connection to where I've been maybe trying to push some stuff down because it's like I don't want to react. There's been some stuff that has happened with my son's school where it has pissed me off. I've allowed it to piss me off. Okay. But it's not like I'm going to go there and yell at them. And maybe I haven't found a healthy outlet to, process that. Or maybe I'm logically just trying to talk myself from whatever, making poor choices. So I'm like going, wow, like that's interesting. Maybe this heat's been kind of going up into my head. You know what I mean? So after this call, I think I'm going to do a cold plunge, but to bring, the energy down. But, as far as the body awareness and like processing that, it's more like this. It's like people who are not dealing with their emotions do get a lot of headaches. They bump their heads a lot. They bump their feet a lot. There's little indicators. Things are not working out. You go out to your car and you have a flat tire. Electronics start to break and so forth. It's interesting how we get signals from our environment and physical body that there's maybe some type of block. That's enough. I've never met a client who had all these challenges with their physical body or the things that are breaking their life, and there not be something that they're not there's not some hidden belief that is holding them back from living the life they want to live. Now, as far as why we might go into physical pain when we ultimately want pleasure is this. As an example, let's just imagine that this actually happened. So I forgot. There's a movie. I know you sometimes do research. I think there's a movie called Shine, and it's a movie about a famous piano player. And during his recital, or when he was performing he was basically, it was going to be part of, he's going to be part of some orchestra or something. Now, I'm probably botching this. This truly happened. So I think the story is that his father was in a concentration camp, and he basically, his father survived, but the message he told his son was, don't be seen. Don't be singled out. They'll get you, the Nazis. And during his performance, he started to sweat. He had a psychotic break. He broke down because what he was doing was going against this mental unconscious program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a movie about this.
Not safe to shine, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Shining
yeah,
equals death. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, like, people listen to this or watching this, you can Google it and get the accurate information, but that would be an example. So that's what happened with the body. Now, if we're also avoiding pleasure because of a blocked, but like some belief is blocking us, then we're going to be depriving ourselves no differently than if we need water. We're going to be dehydrated. So it's like, for example, if you keep going out there and you're trying to meet the love of your life and you keep getting rejected, and then you make the choice not to date, and you tell people, I'm happy to be single, and you proclaim it, there's nothing wrong with singlehood, but you haven't dealt with the hidden belief that I am unworthy. Health issues, other things in your life will not work out. It'll manifest in your physical body and outward, okay? And I'm bringing that up because a lot of times people will try to move away from fear rather than push through it. But it'll resurface in another relationship or situation.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll open the kimono a little bit on that one because that's I can relate to that. It's the story. We can have the external story, the situations that give us the opportunity to realize where we might have limiting beliefs or hidden beliefs. The whole situation with the pandemic, the how like unsettling or like how much change there was involved with that. Me personally, that involved like having just creating momentum in business, and then it boom gone, and then having to adapt, and then leading to like a dissolvement of an amicable but still a dissolvement of a business partnership, boom, and then a reset. And it's weird how there's like, as I've like just, there's been a lot of it I've been okay with and I roll with, and it's actually created more opportunity, and you just roll with it, resilience. But it's funny how for me, there's certain areas where I notice that like I certainly have not been dating. I have been not like this like feeling of when I've gotten in there, it's like deeper beliefs that, because I am not where I was, whatever the story was, then that means that I am not, ready, or, these kind of things. Right. So I'm still spotting those like beliefs and going in, which is like brings up another thing, which is what there are kind of layers to this stuff as you're doing it. Like, I think you got to be careful not to get like, think I can't do anything in life until I have everything completely healed or fixed. That's not the point. The point is to like, be out in life, and figure it out as you go. But I can relate to that.
By the way, you just mentioned something, because that happens to a lot of people, including it has happened to me. And that is where, like, it could be you're not dating, and the external or the projection might be that I can't take them out. I can't say buy dinners, or I got to be more frugal. It could be just a more inner conflict, such as I'm not the man I want to be right now. But it could be a projection into the future. Like when I have money, I'll be able to take them here and there and so forth. When the truth is that underneath that, you can go deeper and say, well, because you don't have money right now, or you have to be frugal, how does that make you feel about yourself? I don't feel enough. I don't feel attractive right now. Okay. What can you do right now to feel attractive? And, and an example would be is that I met this guy who was almost going to play professional baseball, and he injured his arm, which sounds very common. And he ended up getting a corporate job, and he didn't really like it. I mean, he really liked action. He liked the competitive kind of feel, and good looking guy. He's really good with talking to the ladies, and he was seeing me to feel better about his decisions. And plus he also said to me that he said, for last year, I haven't really been meeting a lot of women, and I discovered the energy he had. And it was he was in between jobs, but he was seeing a headhunter or a business coach plus me. And because of his belief about that he wasn't working now, and that he was kind of a little bit indecisive what direction he was going to go, he was not fully shown up that way. When he worked with me, first session, he shifted that around where I said, dude, the fact that you hired me as a coach and you're not going to just work some shitty job and you want something else is pretty amazing. And I said, pretty much the confidence in just knowing that you're learning and growing in life is a lot for a lot of women. So he put himself out there by even being transparent and saying, I left this job. I used to play, semi-pro baseball. I'm looking into maybe doing something to sports. I'm working with a coach to really integrate this. All of a sudden, while he's not working, he's unemployed, he started meeting women again because he shifted within himself.
Yeah. And I've experienced that for sure. I mean, I went to, definitely, I know that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that, because it's a really good example. And I think there's another level to it too. Here's another thing to get on the metaphysical side or the spiritual side. The only conclusion I've been able to arrive to, my personal belief about why, life even exists, is it comes down to consciousness, and it comes down to, it's there's power, and then there's your ability to wield it or shoot yourself in the foot with it, right? And in order to handle power, you have to be able to learn lessons in realizing and be grounded in that self-trust, learning to integrate life as it happens and the changes that occur, and realize that you're bigger than any of those things that happens to you, changes in the body, changes in your life, death, these things. And you have to move through that fear to be, and confront those things to realize that you can't avoid it. But I think that's the point. It's all about growth. And something I've noticed is that while on the one hand I can say, well, oh no, I'm not dating and stuff as much, whatever. The other side of it is well, obviously things needed to be confronted. And in the process of going deeper and getting clearer, I realized that my actual standards and what is a better match for me has come into more clarity. And that's good. In other words, there's growth that's involved in that, where it's I know I could go and I'll be real. I know I could go out any night and just bed a woman. I could do it. Because I know how to, right? It comes down to, just like you said, I can be confident enough to do that. But what was really coming up for me was I realized that down deep that there's a caliber and there's a level of consciousness that I want mirrored for me, in the feminine, for me personally, someone that would be a good dance partner for me. And so it was valuable to have those experiences that pulled me away from my old self. Not that it was wrong, but just maybe that kind of chapter in the way it was showing up needed to evolve.
Yeah, I mean, I am going to share back what you kind of said, because so people can relate. Now it sounds like I'm the host, but it's when you hook up with that one person one more time. They're just like a fuck buddy, it
Mhm.
doesn't feel fun anymore. It's like, why does this not feel fun anymore? Even though it's easy. Wait a minute, I
Mhm.
don't want easy. I want growth. Many of us have said yes to things again, and then we kind of had that reflection, like, I'm not going to do that again. And I think that, you've had enough experiences. I mean, you
Mhm.
actually were a late bloomer, and you had to kind of go through it. I mean,
Mhm.
what you went through is what most people maybe would like experience a little bit in high school, and then in their 20s, mid 20s, they would figure it out. But like I get it. And if we're not pursuing the things, the people that match our current consciousness, life will slap us. Something will
Mhm.
happen. It won't feel good, or like we'll have to deal with a flat tire, a challenge,
Yeah.
or an irate phone call. Yeah.
And there's something about experiencing the distance from or the perceived lack of something that helps you develop a deeper appreciation of what you actually value. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, look, I love a heart-shaped ass as much as I ever have, right? But I want a heart and a heart-shaped ass. You know what I mean? Like I want I'm not denying that part of me or whatever, but it's like the like a woman who's like conscious and capable of like just the simple. Honestly, I don't care about her story so much as I care about whether she can receive. She's a good coach for herself. Does she take accountability? Like that's very sexy to me when a woman takes accountability,
Mm-hmm.
um, and can understand her emotions. And because then we can dance together when it's like that. But if there's like story and drama and past relationship, this and that, like I'm just sorry. Like I'm just not, yeah, I mean, not sorry. I'm just not interested in that.
Yeah. Since this conversation's about the self, and you just brought up, hopefully like being able to attract a woman like that. I am with a woman like that. And I would say that, like, she told me that most of her relationships would only last a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised because I think she's just amazing. And I even told her, I said, I don't know how anyone would not get along with you, but it's because of her consciousness and what
Mm-hmm.
she's not willing to tolerate certain things. So we're a great match, such as she has sometimes unconsciously has said, as a woman, when she would say as a woman, depending on what the conversation was, I would say, how about, what does it feel like if you say as Nicole, as me, myself, versus, you know, hiding behind the collective consciousness of like all females? And what I mean by that, it'd be no different than if she were trying to challenge me of trying to be the protector and provider. And like, I absolutely wanted to always pay the bills, and I had like kind of like these outdated beliefs. What if I were to go, well, as a man, you know how men are?
Mm-hmm.
That is dismissing like what she's asking, or also where I can grow, because who I am is not like just this archetypal man is supposed to be a certain way and robotic. And so as I challenge those beliefs, because even that isn't my true sense of self. It's an identity in which I've created because it gave me social value. Things have changed a lot. As an example, whereas I tried to be like Harrison Ford, Sylvester Stallone, um, muscular guys to charming. I mean, I would say Indiana Jones was the ultimate because he was attractive, he was smart, he was kind of a risk taker, and he'd always try to do the good things. And of course, he got the
He knew how to
women.
use a whip.
Okay? Yeah, he knew how to use a whip. They didn't show him, behind closed doors, in the
Yeah, we
bedroom.
know what he did with that whip.
So, so, okay, so that is like, say, the idea of man for like women in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, like where that type of man would be attractive. Now, I got a doctorate in clinical psychology. I'm pretty adventurous, and I do have a wild side to me, but I'm not relatable to a lot of alphas or Gen Zs. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't think I'm that like to them attractive. They might think I'm like toxic, masculine. Who knows? But again, like it was confusing for me because during a different time and space and generations and decades, like I got a lot more positive feedback for, say, being what I created, whether it was me or not. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I used to even lead women's groups. I was the only male and I never got pushback.
Mm-hmm.
After the Me Too movement, after asshole Bill Cosby, like, who are you as a man, an educated man, to, even if I said it in a really great way or like just, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
like inclusive way, it would not be well received. My girlfriend, being a woman, could take my material and share it and be well received because it's coming from a woman,
Yeah.
And so, point of me sharing this is that I've had to go through a dark night of the soul of letting go of all these things I thought would be attractive still. And I'm okay with it because that's another identity. Why do I need to be attractive? Meaning like people like me.
Yeah.
Not talking about physicality. Of course, I always want to stay in good shape because it makes me feel good. And I have a son, but it's where.
But you're doing it for you. You're doing it for you.
I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing anything for anyone else anymore. Of course, I want my woman to be attracted to me, and she's attracted to that type of man, the Harrison Ford. But like to younger people, like there might be people already judging this video, like these fucking assholes, these outdated, men, blah blah blah. I don't give a shit. But the point is that I'm letting go of that identity. An identity which used to give me a lot of social value.
Yeah.
So the true self is, who am I now? Do I love this person? Is this choice come from me right now? Am I relaxed right now? Does this feel open? Do I feel love? Does it feel connected to others?
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. Well, very good. So I want to, in the final little segment here, I want to steer it towards kind of the original promise of the video, about helping someone like get results or, experience what you're talking about, the process of developing and rebuilding, or aligning with true trust in the self through and developing emotional resilience as part of it, aka growth, power, the ability to manifest, all the, anyone who's been tapped into like the new age world, we get excited about the shiny things like manifesting and creating the life you want, even coaching, even mainstream, business coaching is still part of that kind of concept, personal growth, personal development. It's all about like, focus the mind on what you can achieve. And it's absolutely true. But we've talked about this before. There's not enough conversations where people are being honest about the shadow component of things or the hidden things. And it's like, you can think you're trying to create something, but what you're actually going to create is really who you are. And you have to, in other words, that's one of the reasons you have to accept everything you create. So it's important to have two sides of your personal growth. There's the external where you're expressing intentionally. And then there's the internal where you're identifying and being very honest with yourself, brutally, lovingly honest with yourself about what you're actually feeling and using the I language to develop the beliefs. And that process, if you're new to it, because it just isn't taught as much, okay? Not nearly as much. If you're new to it, how can someone get started with that let's start with what can you do at home today on your own to kind of maybe, could you give a couple tips on that? And I know you have even a quiz for I think that personality friction point thing is an interesting one as well. So any pointers on practical application you can do right now at home?
Well, I hope by watching this video or hearing this video, by me going through my own process in regards to my son and those I statements, that might give you kind of an understanding where we're coming from. But here would be a couple tools. One would be this, is that you can basically close your eyes and you can put your left hand out, your right hand out, like as if they're up to the ceiling. And what I want you to do is that you would go to a belief about a person, situation, or thing. Like it might be this guy's a jerk. Do I go for the job? To he should have said this or that. And then you go to the left hand and you just kind of go to the left hand. How do I want to feel about this anyway? How do I want to feel about this anyway? And this little simple technique is it helps you look at the story, but also helps you be accountable for the feelings you want to have anyway. Okay. So now what I'm doing is I'm kind of opening up to where I see the structure of like how beliefs can also create emotions, but also I can look at the emotions I want to feel. So that's a little technique that will kind of help you become more introspective so you can see it from a higher perspective. Okay, I want to feel good and empowered anyway. Then it'd be going back to now the right hand again. What actions do I want to take to maybe feel this way anyway? Meaning that you might never say, hear an apology by this person. You maybe need to take an action and say something because it's good for you and your growth. But it's where you look at what actions that you can take or you might do as maybe you're going to do it or not. You go back to left hand again. If whether I do this or not, how do I want to feel anyway? Back to that. Taking personal responsibility, because you might say sorry to that person, or you might say how that person hurt you, but they don't say sorry, but you still choose to feel good. So that's a simple technique right there that can be very helpful. Another one is this. This is in my book, and you can put it here in underneath the notes here or wherever we post this. And there's a section in the book where it talks about what did love feel like in your home? When you think of love, how does it make you feel? What was the first time you felt disappointed by love? There are like 10 questions that you can ask yourself about the meaning of love, what it meant to you, what happens to you when someone says they love you. By those 10 introspective type of questions, you'll notice that, I have a fear response to someone liking me, or I have a fear response to being vulnerable because when I opened up to my parents, or when I opened myself to my boyfriend, he cheated on me, I lost trust in myself, or dating. But it's, if we look at probably where we were wounded the most, it usually ties into relationships and not feeling love. So by just basically ripping apart like the whole story and going to your love story and what love means to you, you'll be able to discern how probably most of your challenge and experiences were not love at all. It was abuse. It was unconscious programming. It was just poor behavior. And therefore it will allow you to kind of step back for a moment, kind of go, how do I want to experience love now? What does love feel like to me now? And if someone doesn't even know that, then you create that. Again, remember about the imagination. If love is the most scariest thing, where is love the best or most enjoyable? Petting my cat, walking my dog. I mean, love doesn't have to start with a human being. It can start with just, I love my morning strolls. But it's just shifting your consciousness to the idea that love comes in many forms and it's not conditional.
Yeah. It may not always match the story that you have in your head.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So we'll do, if you can, you'll give me those questions. Yeah. And for those of you watching, what we'll do is I'll put that in the description below this video, so you can go and do a little self exercise. That'll be a great little thing. Very cool. And I mentioned the personality friction point quiz. That's an interesting one too, because that one shows you where you're how just you might have some, like, it helps you see the way you are might be triggering to other people and you triggered by them.
You want to share what it is?
Yeah.
So basically the personality friction point is a chapter out of my book, and I turned it into a quiz because I felt it'd be a fun thing to do for people, because many people don't want to get through a book, and that's okay. So I created a fun way to kind of evaluate like how you might show up in social settings. As an example, many of us think that we have this perfect white shirt on. not knowing that there's a red ketchup stain and everyone else sees it but ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So the personality friction point quiz asks certain questions, and from answering those simple questions, it'll give you one of those personality friction points, and it's pretty accurate. But what's really cool too is that in a lighter way, it tells you also possibly why you might be this way. So, for example, a person might feel really insecure, so they dominate conversations by making themselves sound really smart, or they might always try to make everybody laugh. To discover behind that, it's that they're afraid to be vulnerable, or it could be that they complain a lot, and through this quiz, you can recognize that might be a reason why people don't like talk to you as much, because you do complain a lot. You don't make others feel that good. And so it's a very simple quiz to kind of like open up Pandora's box, to kind of look at yourself in ways that which you don't see yourself in real time, and possibly shift that so you start attracting a better life and better relationships.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention something else. So first of all, I'll put a link to that quiz right here, and it's a free. You can do this 100% for free. It's quick self-evaluation. It took me, I think, 5-10 minutes maybe. And the other thing I'm going to plug here, Dr. A, is that we're creating like a community, the Soulful Synergy Squad, because you're going to notice, like anyone who gets involved in self-reflection and stuff, you quickly realize and wake up to the fact that it's very valuable to have other people that do that as well, that at least understand that. And because a lot of times maybe the friends we have around us, the people, not that you don't love them or whatever, they can still be your friends. No one's asking you to like get angry at them, whatever, but you just realize that they just may not be able to dance with you or meet you in this area, because it's just not something they've been introduced to. It's just part of like, when you wake up to this stuff, you feel these, like, it's part of what you have to integrate, so it's helpful to have support. So maybe what we can do is put a link here, Ray, to the page we have, even though it's not completely up yet. And then we could put like an interest list, so an email opt-in or something. So if they're interested in it, you could just get notified whenever that's going to be available. And the final thing, Dr. Ray, is I want to get your insights as the final thing here. If someone has they realize that it would be very useful for me to sit with a coach that can help be a mirror for me, and help kind of train me how to do this with myself, and guide me through those processes like you do and other people. How does someone go about making a good decision? Should they go to a traditional therapist? Is it what do you look for in someone to help you if you want a one-to-one experience, like a professional friend to help you learn this stuff?
So, the thing is that a lot of people don't trust themselves. And what's interesting about this journey is that the idea of feeling good is a positive barometer, and that's not always so. So we can put this here also, questions that they can ask as well, such as, is a teacher actually doing what they say we should do?
Real quick, these are questions for them to ask like a coach or someone they're working with.
Well, what it is, it's when they're evaluating, because there's no one path. There's no, in other words, this might be a path for one person right now. What I mean by that is they're listening to this, and now they're becoming open, and they're going to search, and they're going to maybe talk to friends, and their friends are going to say, hey, so-and-so is really good. And that's typically, I think, how people connect. So when they do that,
whether it's a therapist, a coach, somatic body work, anything like that, these would be questions you would want to ask that facilitator to see if it's a good fit for you.
Yeah, so it's just, I'll just give a few here, and you can put underneath. We're giving them a lot of information, which is great. Is the teacher actually doing what they say we should do? Are they modeling that? If they're teaching meditation, they seem like a stress case. I mean, run. Do I agree with what they're teaching? You need to agree with it. They might have different values. Could this hurt me or someone else if we try it? So if it seems like it can hurt you or someone else, it's not probably for you. Am I okay with saying no to this if I don't like it? So that if you're a people pleaser, that might help you kind of like evaluate like whether or not you're just doing this because someone else told you to do it. Are they asking me to promise something that I'm not ready for? Can I stop going if they don't think it's if I don't think it's helping? Is there more stuff like good reviews or success stories to show this teacher or class is legit? There's like this, it's more logical, common sense questions. But I have to tell you, when people enter the healing world, it's as if logic goes out the door. And I'll give you an example. Oh my God, it's here in my community. So where I live in Ashland, Oregon, there's a lot of plant medicine circles. And I support that path. I've done it. However, the way it's done with like indigenous people is, first off, the culture supports you in a way where you have time to process and integrate. And they're not doing it every weekend. So like with here in Ashland, Oregon, oh my God, they'll do it every weekend too. The story is always about like, this is what came up. I had this download, and they're processing while their dishes are not washed and their children are still having challenges, but they're still going through this process, and they're kind of caught up in the emotions and the idea that this is helping them when their life is still in shambles. And I mention this because you will see this. There's the idea that we're going to promise you this and that. To your friends might say, it's really helping me, but they might say it's helping me because of how they're feeling in that moment. They feel connection to the coach. They feel connection to the community. But look at the action. Look at the outcome. If you're not seeing the positive results, it might be bullshit. It might not be aligned with you. So it's always important to step back. Sure, of course, I would want to connect to someone or something that makes me feel good, but I also want to see the proof. I also want to see the actionable things that I want to, or outcomes that I want to achieve in my life. Bottom line. And oftentimes, if you question a coach about that, if they have taken personal responsibility and have healed their shadows, they'll respond, yeah, thank you. We love skeptics, and they'll talk to you. But there are many coaches will say, it's your shit. You're projecting. This is part of the process. You're just resisting us. So it's very important to trust your intuition, your heart, maybe talk to a friend to help you with decisions if you can't really trust your own. But again, ask yourself or this person or these people these logical questions.
I tell myself now, I'd rather trust myself and be wrong than listen to someone else's idea of what they think is right for me. If it comes down to a choice, because if I trust myself and I make a mistake, I can take full responsibility for that. If I listen to someone else, I might be tempted to fall into like a victim thing, whatever. So it's better to me, it's like, if the point of life is like, I'm going to find out what happens. This is my best intuition. I am listening to that. It's funny how that can feel like the riskier thing to do, but that doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. It's not risky in the sense of like, it takes courage is the word I'm actually looking for. It's an act of courage. It's an act of courage to act in the direction of who you are. And just on the coaching note, when I went to my coaching certification, one of the things I like that I was a really good perspective about coaching is that, as a coach, like the person who coaches you or is guiding you through something should be someone that has walked that path. This kind of comes to this concept of the hero's journey, where they've been through something, they've had their dark night of the soul, they've had a particular challenge in life, whatever, and they've risen from that, and they've gained some type of insider knowledge that if they shared with you would help compress time for you. It can help you avoid all the over processing and all that, and actually drive the result or arrive sooner rather than later, which is kind of one of the beauties of human experiences. We all have different perspectives and unique skill sets. So back to that logical thing, it's like, does that coach or that person, do they exemplify what they are coaching. And if not, then maybe go find someone who is, like if the guy under the bridge, is giving you some life insights on money, just don't maybe expect that to yield a
Dude, it's a trip. It's like, it's as if
good result.
all logic goes out the window when it comes into the healing and transformational space. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, there's a reason why there's many like new realtors who will either rent a car or try to buy a car that looks nicer when they're trying to sell a person's home, because it doesn't look professional to show up like in a 1972 Pinto. So like there's, or someone's again giving you financial advice, and yet they're living nothing wrong, but like, they're 45 years old and living with their parents because they're broke from poor, business decisions. You might want to, you would question that probably. So when it comes to a coach or therapist, like if you're seeking happiness, are they smiling a lot? Are they really serious? If you have children and they're telling you to take plant medicine and don't worry about it, and that to keep taking plant medicine, and you feel ungrounded, and you can't like handle your daily tasks and so forth with taking care of children, they might not be relatable. They're not connected to you, And then just the other part was this, is that, like, for example, if I were a relationship coach and yet all I did was talk about how women are narcissists, or I haven't been able to be in a long-term relationship, why hire me as a relationship coach? If I have not been able to have a better relationship myself, or be in a long-term relationship, or talk about relationships in a loving way.
Yeah. Pretty straightforward. It's funny because on the entrepreneurial side, there is like, to look on the other side of the coin, there is like this concept of like fake it till you make it. That might be great for like real estate. But when it comes to your soul, maybe be a little bit more, have even more discretion with that. The truth is you can go learn, you can be new at real estate. You're working with a broker. You're tapped into a system that's already proven and works. And, you're trying to like create your outer personal brand. That's one thing. But when it comes to like your soul and your deeper, your you, and someone's helping you with you on that deep of a level, they need to be exemplifying what it is that you seek to cultivate within the self. Not that anyone's going to be absolutely perfect. And if you are a coach, I would say if you're someone who's getting started, just be honest with yourself where you're at. You're going to learn coaching tools and things. And if you're not trained with trauma, for example, and you haven't had those experiences, just like be okay with that. Like that's just something you just don't have actual training with. And if you have someone shows up that is too much for you to handle, or you can tell that it's just not what you've been trained in, then just refer them out. So in other words, as a coach, it's okay to like be where you're at. No one's saying you can't be a coach. I've likened it like to this, like, I play guitar, and if I learn, there's 5 basic chords in the guitar. If I learn 3 of those chords instead of the 5, well, I'm a 3-chord guitar teacher, right? And if someone is looking for a 5-chord guitar teacher, or they already know the 3 chords and they want to know the other 2, I'm not a good fit for them. It's just that simple. But maybe that makes me realize I learned 2 more chords. Now I'm a 5-chord guitar teacher, right? And then on and on. So everyone's growing. It's okay to be where you're at. But I think in the healing communities, you get people that get a little bit overconfident, and they think that they can easily just transfer their zeal for life and spirituality to someone, and that they're going to have the same exact experience they did by going. And you may learn that that's not always true. It takes some skill to help a person, self-reflect.
I want to share something about that, because something came up for me for that. And the reason why I think it happens more in the healing community or the coaching industry, it's this. So when you work with a lawyer, sure, they might sleep with their client. It's separate, like the relationship kind of is separate from kind of like what they're doing together. Like when you are a coach, you're really in someone's life. Like you might talk to the client more than he or she talks to their husband. You're deeper with them, like, and if it's consistent. So it's a real relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a coach or therapist has unhealed stuff with their mom or dad, and you're trying to work out mom and dad stuff, you can trigger their mom and dad stuff from that closeness. And that's what kind of makes it a little bit different. Even there have been, I've heard this, women have seen female therapists, and here they're talking about they want to finally heal it. Or it just maybe it happened a year ago. Instead of the therapist going, tell me more about that, the first thing comes out of her mouth, did you report it? And starts talking more about legalities and things like that's all about them and their unhealed stuff.
Yeah.
And they felt unsafe in that room. So this happens. So this is where it gets really messy. So you want to work with people who have worked through their shadows. And if their shadow gets in a way, that they're able to talk about it, or you're able to bring it up and go, hey, that doesn't feel right to me. And hopefully they'll receive that and maybe apologize or use it as source material to help work with you still.
Perfect. Cool. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here, Dr. Ray. So for everyone watching, we'll put those qualifying questions. I'll have those in the description as well, along with the other things that we promised. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, or if this stirred up any other topics you would like a deeper dive in, then just go ahead and drop that in the comments as well, wherever you might be listening. Currently, I'm on YouTube and Spotify, soon to be other platforms. And any final thoughts, Dr. Ray, before we close out?
I'm good here.
Perfect. Yeah, we had a little bit of a longer one today. I will just say that love yourself. And if you love yourself, you'll be honest with yourself about what you feel, and don't be afraid to go and get some insights and some help. Use the tools we've provided below to kind of get started. And I'll put your link here as well, Dr. Ray, if someone wants to reach out directly to you, to your website. And with that, I want to thank you for being on the show again, Dr. Ray. And until next time.
Thank you much, brother.
All right, we'll see you guys later.